Yes, and we're back live once again. It is Tuesday, the 23rd. I gotta update my calendar. Let's see here. Hold on. Da 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 da. There we go. February is literally almost over. That is insane to me. Goodness gracious. I cannot believe that. But that's where we're at. So, for those of us, or for those of you, I should say, joining us online, if you would, please leave that comment in the chat. That would be wonderful. That would make me happy for my record so I can go update some stuff. That'd be great. And I'll tell you how today is going to work. Basically, number one, I am going to be posting a PDF into the Google Classroom stream in the next few minutes. And I would like to start by reviewing and going through those particular questions. Now, obviously, I'm not going to ask for, an entire word problem to be written down, but there are going to be certain problems, not all of them, but certain problems within that PDF that I am going to ask you to write into your notes. But we'll get there in a few minutes. After that, I would like to talk a little bit about the assignment that you guys had due today. There it is right there. It was a practice on, getting the instructions here, it was a practice on the two types of power systems or power indexes that we've talked about, the Banzhaf power index and the Shapley-Shubik power index. I would like to get more practice with the two of them today. I would like to get more practice with the two of them today. I'm just looking over the worksheet right here because I only gave you guys the two problems, one to do for Banzhaf and one to do for Shapley-Shubik. And I would like to talk a little bit about at least one of those problems today. So, in the meantime, I'm going to go post that PDF into the Google Classroom stream so you guys can access that, number one. Number two, I am going to ask that you do have those notebooks out and open because, like I said, I'm going to ask for certain problems to be written down, but not all of them. And of course, yes, in the stream, if you have not left a comment, please make sure that you do. Let's see here. Okay, post. So the PDF that I would like to start with has been posted into the Google Classroom stream. Here we go. I'm going to open that up here on my computer, but of course you have a better view of it on your computer with that PDF and whatnot. I'm going to flip my screen over here. There we go. Come on, connect. I just reload it. Okay, good. Boom, boom, and boom. So, if you are in the live stream, of course, I can see all the comments right here at my desk, although I'm going to be getting up and down, so I'm going to be able to see them at my desk, and I'll be able to see them at the computer as well. So please make sure you are leaving those comments. So, as I said, I just wanted to kind of go through these problems one at a time. But I'm not going to have you write down all of them, only a few of them, only the ones that I really believe that we need to be writing down. And actually, they're going to be the ones that are focusing more on Banzhaf and Shapley-Shubik. But just to confirm some of the answers here, a player who has no power whatsoever, by definition, is a dummy. A player is said to have this if they can keep a motion from being passed if they are the only player to vote no. Now, for number two, I want to be very clear about number two. Number two, people could accidentally interpret this as being a dictator. A dictator, by definition, can pass whatever the heck they want or not pass whatever the heck they want. A dictator technically has what they call veto power because a dictator can just basically say, nope, and that's by definition technically a veto. But when we're talking about veto power, we really have to be talking about a non-dictatorial situation. It's like you guys know the whole square rectangle argument from back in the day. You know what I'm saying? Like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not necessarily a square. Yeah, it's like a dictator has veto power, but just because you have veto power doesn't make you a dictator. It's a similar argument. For number 2, a player has veto power if they can keep a motion from being passed if they are the only player to vote no. So then it comes down to number 3. And number 3 is one of those problems that, yes, I would like you to write down. So I'm going to go to my notes. And I would like to write down something for number 3. So let's see what we got here. I am going to just title my notes weighted voting continued. No, actually, you know what? Weighted voting practice. There we go. That's better. And today is the 23rd. And I'm just going to write down for this example the voting system that is in place. 9631. Good. Okay. Bring this up. And there we go. So this is the voting system in this example. And the question becomes, well, who has, if anybody, veto power? It is possible, believe me, it is possible for more than one player to have veto power. Please keep that in mind. It is definitely possible. It is also possible for no one to have veto power. Well, we'll see. So ultimately, if I'm going to try and figure out veto power, I'm going to have everyone else vote against something and have one player vote for it. So, for example, player 1 versus everybody. Player 1 would have 9 votes, and everybody else would have 10 votes. They need 17 to meet the quota. By this definition, player 1 has veto power. Now, whether or not more people have veto power, we're going to figure that out in a moment. But if you just compare one player versus everybody else, if they don't meet the quota, then you can say that that one player so far has veto power. Let me do player 2 versus everybody else. Player 2 has 6 votes. Everybody else altogether would equal 13 votes. They need 17 to meet the quota. By definition, player 2 also has veto power. This is how you can determine veto power. Just comparing the one player versus the grand total of everyone else's votes. Let me try player 3. Now, mind you, if I get to a point where, oh, this player doesn't have it, then I'm pretty much done. I pretty much nailed it at that point. Player 3 has 3 votes versus everybody else, which grand total, 15, 16. Oh, snap. If player 3 decides to not vote for something, they can't pass it. By definition, player 3 also has veto power. Just for completion's sake, if I were to compare player 4 versus everybody else, I think I know how this one's going to go, but I just want to check it regardless. Player 4 has 1 vote, and everyone else altogether would be 18. That is not veto power. They don't need player 4 to pass something. They don't need player 4 to pass something. Who has the power of the veto in this example? Yeah. Just 1, 2, 3. And more than one person has the power of veto. That can happen. In this voting system, it absolutely happened. But this is how you can figure it out. You compare that one player versus everybody else. Can everybody else pass it without you? If they can pass it without you, then I'm sorry, you don't have the veto. If they can't pass it without you, then by definition, that is a veto. Just for the sake of argument, the president of the United States has veto power in terms of like, here's a bill they want him to sign. He's like, nope, I'm going to veto this bill. Congress can actually override the presidential veto. Do you know how? I don't know. You guys have you taken a U.S. history? Yeah. So like, obviously the president has the veto, but Congress can override that veto. They can override that veto if they vote in favor to override it. I believe it's by 2/3, which to get Congress to agree by a margin of 2/3 is next to impossible. Right now, Congress is split 50-50 between the left and the right. I doubt that they would ever be able to get the 2/3. But regardless, let's see. Flipping back to flip back to this. So for number 3, on the PDF, for those of you joining us in the live stream, the PDF is in the Google Classroom stream. I posted the PDF of that so you don't have to squint at the screen. But for number 3, the answer should have been C. The answer should have been C. All right, scrolling down. Dummies. Now, the interesting thing is this is the exact same voting system. This is the exact same voting system. Now, in terms of someone being a dummy, it doesn't matter if they can pass something without you. What matters whether or not you are a dummy is whether or not at any given time you are a critical player. Are you a critical player at any given time? Now, I kind of went through on paper. What it meant to be veto power, and I want to go back to that paper in a little bit, because what I'm going to do on paper is going to help answer numbers 4 and 5, because number 4 wants to know, are there any dummies? And number 5 wants to know, which of the following is a winning coalition? You know what? I'm going to do both in one shot here. That would be great. So, I'm going to go back to my notes real quick. I'm going to go back to my notes, and I'm going to rewrite this voting system right here. I want to rewrite this voting system. And what I would like to do is I would actually like to list out all of the quote-unquote winning coalitions. I want to write out all of the winning coalitions. Now, we've started this a little bit by doing, one player versus everybody. But let's just do it like this then. First of all, a winning coalition here would be player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4, which total 19 votes. This is everybody voting for the same thing. In order to determine the critical player, as we've talked about, we have to remove one player and see if they drop below the quota. Now, technically, we already know, if you remove player 1, they're going to drop to 10. If you remove player 2, they're going to drop to 13. If you remove player 3, they're going to drop to 16. Players 1, 2, and 3 are absolutely critical. Player 4 is not. Now, this is not the only winning coalition. And I want to talk about that. I just wanted to start with, okay, what if all of them voted the same way? What if it was unanimous? Even if it was unanimous, who is critical? Well, it's critical if the person definitely has veto power. Let's go to a coalition of 3 people. Player 1, player 2, and player 3, we already know total 18 people. Or 18 votes, I should say. And and as we talked about before, they are all critical once again. We can keep going with this thing. Let's see. Can I get it with a player 4? I want to get 3 people with a player 4. No, I can't get 3 people with a player 4. I can't get 3 people with a player 4. Because if I do 3 people, if I do players 1, 2, and 4, we already gave veto power to player 3. If I do players, 2, 3, no, 2, 3, 1, 3, 4, I can't meet the quota either. I legit think this is it. I don't think there's any other way to meet the quota of 17 votes. Question: when was player 4 ever critical? When was player 4 ever critical? Yeah, that's a dummy. That's how we determine who a dummy is. Player 4 was never critical. These are the only winning coalitions. These are the only winning coalitions according to this system. On your homework, you had more winning coalitions, which I would, like to talk about that in a little bit, because the system was set up differently. But the way that this system is set up, there is no more winning coalitions. And based on each winning coalition, we were able to determine who was a critical player, meaning remove them from the system and you can't pass the vote. Player 4 was never critical. Thus, by definition, player 4 is a dummy. Player 4 is a dummy. Never critical. What number was that? That was number 4. Yeah, and the answer was yes, player 4. Player 4 is the dummy. Now for number 5, I'll flip back to my screen in a moment, but with number 5, they wanted to know which of the following is a winning coalition. And yes, we wrote down 2 different winning coalitions, but for the multiple choice problem number 5, the answer had to be C, which is players 1, 2, and 3, because they meet the quota of 17 votes. So we already wrote that one down in terms of a winning coalition. Now, actually, I want to finish this one out in terms of Banzaf. I want to finish out this problem talking about the Banzaf power index. Now, the way that you determine how much power you have, first you write down all of the winning coalitions, which we did. Number of votes is probably a good idea because you need to figure out who is a critical player. Who is a critical player within that winning coalition? List out all the critical players. Now, according to this, we figured out that there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instances of a critical player. There were 6 instances of a critical player. And the way that the Banzaf power index works is that you take each player, okay, player 1, how many times was that player critical? Divided by the total number of times you found a critical event. Well, player 1 was 2 out of 6. Player 2 was 2 out of 6. And player 3 was 2 out of 6. And player 4 was 0 out of 6. This is how much power each of them hold within this system. My microphone. There we go. So if I'm going to write this down, let's see what we got here. Player 1 was 2 out of 6, or 33.3% power. Player 2 was 2 out of 6, or 33.3% power. Player 3 was 2 out of 6, or 33.3% power. And player 4 was 0 out of 6, 0% power. A dummy in the Banzaf power index, a dummy will end up with 0% power. That is how you can determine who is a dummy within that voting system, because that person holds no power. Even though player 4 holds a vote, that vote means nothing in the context of this voting system. Sorry, player 4. You suck. But you're a dummy. Okay. Flip. Let me see what the next question was. Okay. Let's see if we can actually do this problem without writing anything down. Now, I'm going to write this a little bit larger on the board, of course, just so we can all see it. But again, you have the PDF, especially in a live chat. You do have the PDF in your Google Classroom stream. This is number 6. We're going to try and do this problem. Am I going to be in the glare? No, I'm not going to be in the glare. I'll move it over, though. We're going to try and do this one without writing anything down. See if we can't visually identify which player has veto power. So again, veto power. One player versus everybody else. Let's do player 1. If player 1 votes no, can they still pass it? 7 and 5 and 2. What is that, 14? They can't pass it. Player 1 has veto power. Let's see. Player 2, do you have veto power? No, you don't, because they can pass it without player 2. 11, 5, and 2 add up to, what is that, 17? Player 2 does not. Because player 2 does not, you better believe 3 and 4 don't either. I'll write something down just because I want to now. But like player 1 versus everybody else, this would be 11 versus, what did we say that was? 14. So they can't pass anything. Player 1 has veto power. Good job. Player 2 versus everybody would be 7 votes versus 17. Oh, they can pass it. Sorry, player 2, you don't have veto power. Veto power is if you can prevent them from passing something without your votes. Only player 1 has veto power in this instance. Only player 1. What is the weight of this coalition? When you're talking about the weight of this coalition, you're literally just, okay, what are their total votes? We just did that, 17. Yeah, we did it. We just did that. I did that unintentionally, but we did that. Everybody but player 2. Anyway. Like I said, I wasn't going to write down every problem. I just wanted to review this information that is in front of us. Let me see here. Oh, wait, did I say 17? I said 17, right? It should have been 18. For number 7, for problem number 7. I think I said 17 because I was like 11 and 5 and 2. It doesn't change this. This answer stays the same. This answer stays the same, the veto power one. But these 3 players, I think I added them up differently in my head. That adds up to 18, right? I'm not going crazy? 18. Yeah. I just did a simple computational error. But yeah. That adds up to 18. That's what happens when I try to do things in my head. Ooh, here we go. For number 8. Who is a critical player within that system? Okay, hold on. Players 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 3, and 4 have 11 votes, 5 votes, and 2 votes, which add up to 18 votes. I got it right that time. And they want to know who is critical within that system. Again, how do you determine if someone is critical? You remove them, and they can't pass it. So if you remove, by the way, this equals 18 votes. If you remove player 1, they drop to 7. Player 1 is critical. If you remove player 3, they drop to 13 votes. Player 3 is critical. If you remove player 4, they drop to 16 votes, which is still good. Which is still good. Which means that players 1 and 3 have to be the critical ones in this instance? Absolutely yes. Players 1 and 3 have to be the critical ones in this instance. Number 9, I would like to write down. Number 9, I would like to write down. And again, reminder to those in the chat, I do see there are 5 right there. I only see 3 comments. If you have not left a comment, I do need to see those comments. And a reminder, the PDF is in the Google Classroom stream. But I would like to write down number 9. Let's see what we got here. Number 9, I'll just write this down first, and then I'll flip my camera over. There we go. They want to know, what is the smallest value for Q in order for player 1 to have veto power? Hold on. Yeah, so that player 1 has veto power. Interesting. Oh, my microphone again. There we go. Now, a couple things to this. There are 5 players in this system. There are 5 players, players 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, who have weights of 7, 5, 3, 1, and 1. At a bare minimum, the quota has to be 50% plus 1 of the total number of votes. So, for example, the total number of votes here add up to, I believe, 17. I'm going to double check that. That's 15, 16, 17. There are 17 total votes available. 17 total votes available. 50% would put you at 8.5. Would put you at 8.5. Clearly, you can't have half a vote, so you got to go up to 9. 9 is the absolute bare minimum quota. Now, that may not be the answer to this question, because the question wanted to know, what is the minimum quota in order for player 1 to have veto power? Well, in my notes, if we talked about veto power, then I'm talking about player 1 versus everyone else. Player 1 versus everybody else would be 7 votes versus 8, 9, 10 versus 10 votes. Player 1 versus everybody else would be 7 versus 10. Do you know what the minimum quota would have to be for player 1 to have veto power? No. If it were 9, think of it this way. 9 has to be the minimum quota no matter what, but that doesn't guarantee veto power. 9 votes would have to be the bare minimum because that was 50% plus 1. But in order to have veto power, it means that they can't pass anything without player 1. They can still pass stuff with 10 votes. If the quota were 10, they can still pass stuff. What's the minimum quota got to be? So they can't pass stuff. Minimum quota so that player 1 has veto. You want to take a crack at it? I'm going to throw a number up here. And when I do, it might make a little more sense. It's 11. Because, ladies and gentlemen, because if the quota were 11, that means that they would need, at a bare minimum, 11 votes to pass something. But if player 1 says, nope, if player 1 says no, if player 1 says nuh-uh, and they can't do it, then player 1 has veto power. It's got to be 11. Because without player 1, everybody else totals 10. If the quota were 10, they could do it. If the quota is 11, they can't. That's what allows player 1 to have veto power. I don't care about everybody else. They didn't say, oh, player 1 and player 2 and player 3. No, they just said player 1. So for this problem, number 9, yeah, the answer is C. It's got to be 11. It's got to be 11. Scroll down a little more. Yep. Number 10, consider the weighted voting system. They want to know the number of players. That's a straightforward question. Here, let me give you this. This is problem number 9. Yeah. Find the total number of players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 players. Yeah. The quota is 65, followed by the weights of each of the players. So there are 6 players. That one was kind of a gimme. Number 11. Find the weight of player 3. Again, kind of a gimme right there. I just highlighted it. It's a little hard to see the highlight. Can I zoom in on this? Ooh, I can't. What is this? Go away, you thing. Yeah, here we go. Player 3 has a weight of 22. That was pretty straightforward. Number 12. Find the Banzhaf power index for player 1. I'll take it, yeah. The question, by the way, just so you know, for this problem, the question was, what quota should happen, or what is the minimum quota in order for player 1 to have veto power? And whenever I talk about veto power, it's always the one player versus everybody else, just like we did before. That's how we were able to determine that answer. So I'm going to write this one down as well, because the next few questions are dealing with Banzhaf. So I'm going to write down this example. 6 is the quota. 5, 2, and 1. Flip. There it is. Now for this one, we got to do Banzhaf all the way through. First, we got to list out the winning coalitions. If everybody votes for something, that's pretty much a winning coalition, or it should be a winning coalition. 8 votes. Who is critical? In this instance, let's see. If you take away player 1, they can't do it. If you take away player 2, technically they could still do it. Yeah, players 1 and 3 could still pass this thing by themselves. Player 1 is the only one that's critical up top. All right. Player 1 and player 2 are a winning coalition because they total 7. If you take either one away, you can't pass it. Yeah, if you take either one away, you can't pass it. So they're both critical. You can do player 1 and player 3. They total 6 votes, and automatically they're both critical. And I think that's it. Yeah, you can't do players 2 and 3 at all, because that would only total 3 votes. There were 5 instances of critical events, 5 instances of a player being written down as critical. Player 1 was critical 3 out of 5. Player 2 was critical 1 out of 5. And player 3 was critical 1 out of 5. Now I go back to the PDF, because the PDF is actually going to ask the question. I just wanted to knock out the Banzhaf power index for this thing. If you wanted to, you could do 60%, 20%, 20%. You can, although I think the next few questions are dealing with fractions. Well, let me see what it actually says. Let's see. Find the Banzhaf power index for player 1. Yeah, player 1, 3 out of 5. Oh, it's a different system here now. Scroll back. It's a different system here now. They want to know the Banzaf power index for player 2. I tell you what, I'm going to leave this one for you guys. So I'm actually going to give you the next few minutes. I'm going to write this down as well, but I'm not going to show you what I'm writing. But I'm going to give you the next few minutes to go through this voting system, which I'll write it down 6, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. And they want to know, as a fraction, what is the voting power or the voting index of player 2? So, for those of you in the chat, this is problem number 13 on the quizzes review that I posted to the Google Classroom stream. And they want to know what is the Banzaf power index of player 2. So I'm going to give you the next few minutes. I'm going to have you try this one on your own before I show you what it should have looked like. You got to write out the winning coalitions. You have to figure out who's the critical player within that coalition. And then you can calculate the power index. So I'll just write down winning coal, number of votes, crit. So take the next few minutes. Here we go. When you guys were in elementary school, did they make a big deal about the 100th day of school? They did? They never did when I was in school. It's ridiculous. So it's the 100th day of school for my kid. And they do this thing where they like try to act like dress all old and stuff. Did they do that too? No. Okay. Well, like he's wearing this like white shirt with a bow tie with suspenders. And my wife did up his face to make him look old. So that's his face today. Hold on. There it goes. I think it looks pretty good. I don't know. Anyway, back to this. Let's see what we got here. So if I'm going to figure out the winning coalitions, first, I'd like to start out with I don't know. You can start out with whichever one you want, but I like to typically start out with, okay, let's say they all vote in the same way. If they all vote in the same way, that totals 7, 8, 9, 10 votes. And if you take away one of them, oh, the quota's 6? Oh, so it passes no matter what. If you take away one of the players, it still passes every time. So there are none critical right there. There are none. Now, that's not the final answer, obviously, but I don't know, I just find that interesting. Okay, let's go with 3 players. Players 1, 2, and 3 are definitely winning coalition. That adds up to 9. Now, you will have critical players here because if you remove player 1, they will drop below 6. If you remove player 3, they're still good. If you remove player 2, they're still good, I should say. Players, 1 and 2. Players 1 and 2 are technically winning coalition unto himself. So let me actually just do this. Player 1, 2, and 4, because that is also a winning coalition. That adds up to 8. And if I were to remove either player 1 or player 2, they would drop below the quota. Oh, player 1 and player 3. Interesting. Player 1, player 3, player 4. Now, I'm going to talk about how I'm going through this systematically in a moment, because this is a very important skill to have to be able to go through something like this systematically. But players 1, 3, and 4 all together add up to 7. And players 1 and player 3 are definitely critical. I think that might be... Oh, no, there's one more. I was going to say, I was trying to go through all of the coalitions that have 3 players in it. And there is one more with 3 players. Players 2, 3, 4. Players 2, 3, 4 add up to 6 right on the dot. And all 3 are critical. Now, I'm not done yet. I still have more winning coalitions to write down. I absolutely do. But let me talk to you about how I'm going through this systematically. Systematically, I start with, okay, there are 4 players. Let's just say all 4 vote in a certain direction. Boom, there's a winning coalition. Let's figure out the critical players. Then, let me figure out a winning coalition with 3 players. And the way that I do this systematically with 3 players is I'm going to get, okay, 1, 2, 3, that works. All right, and let me keep it 1, 2 and change it to 4. So 1, 2, 4, that works. So I keep some players the same as I go down the list. Now I've exhausted all of the 1, 2s, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 4. So I went 1, 3, 4. That exhausted that as well. Now, I've potentially exhausted all of the ones that start with player 1. Players 2, 3, 4 are also a winning coalition. It's just going through it one part at a time. But I also have to hit the coalitions that have 2 players. I also have to hit the coalitions that have 2 players in them. I dropped it. And there are actually two more coalitions, two more. Players 1 and 2, which add up to 7, in which they are both critical. And players 1 and 3, which add up to 6, in which they are both critical. Now, this is really interesting because the multiple choice, if you go back to the multiple choice question, which I will in a moment, the multiple choice question gave you 4 choices in which there were 4 fractions to choose from. If I go back to those 4 fractions, those 4 choices, what do you notice about all 4 fractions? What are they over? Yeah. And how many times do you think I had a critical player? Yeah, that worked out great. There are 12 instances of a critical player. And each of those answers were a fraction out of 12. That was a huge hint right there. You have to exhaust all of the winning coalitions. You have to exhaust all of the winning possibilities in order to get this thing done correctly. Now, this question, this particular multiple choice question, asked about player 2, just about player 2, I believe. And player 2 was critical, let's see, 1, 2, 3 times. Player 2 was critical 3 times. Ooh, big question for everyone, big question. In this system of voting, are there any dummies? Ooh. In this system of voting, are there any dummies? Ha 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 ha. This is something that I've kind of verbalized. But basically, if you are a dummy, then you are never critical. Player 1, clearly critical. Player 2, critical. Player 3, critical. Player 4 was only critical once. Not a dummy. Player 4 is not a dummy. Because player 4 was critical at a bare minimum 1 time, then player 4 is not a dummy. Player 4 is actually meaningful in a very small capacity, yes, but still meaningful. So this question, player 2 was critical 3 out of 12 times. Let me actually write down the power index below this, just so I have the final results for it, just for funsies. Player 1 was critical 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times out of 12. Player 2 was critical, we said 1, 2, 3 times out of 12. Player 3 was critical 1, 2, 3 times out of 12. And player 4 was critical 1 time out of 12. Obviously, they should all add up to a whole, which they do, 12 out of 12. Just checking it real quick. Yep, the power index of player 2 was 3 out of 12. So it should have been B in that sense. Yes. Final thing I want to do today. I want to talk about Shapley-Shubik. Again, just as a review. Before I kind of fill you in on how I'm going to be taking this. Or what I'm going to be doing next with you guys. You'll see. Shapley-Shubik. They talk about this idea of a sequential coalition. Anything in terms of a sequential coalition is talking about Shapley-Shubik. They say to consider the voting system that, whatever those numbers are, which player is pivotal in the sequential coalition. Now, that's kind of a little bit of an unfair statement because they didn't actually give you a sequential coalition to work with. Typically, a sequential coalition is when they actually list them in the order that they're voting. So, for example, hold on, 987. If I want to talk about a sequential coalition, the order in which they vote, there is a sequential coalition if they voted in the order of player 1, player 2, player 3. As I talked about a couple class periods ago when we're talking about Shapley-Shubik, the idea is that you have these people voting in real time, and they're going up one at a time in order to vote. So another sequential coalition could be this. Players 1, 3, 2. Because the order in which they vote means something. Player 2, player 1, player 3. Player 2, player 3, player 1. Because again, the order in which they go up matters. Player 3, player 1, player 2. And player 3, player 2, player 1. I believe on that homework assignment that I gave to you guys that for the Shapley-Shubik problem, they listed out everything for you, which is nice. And they wanted you to figure out who was what they call the pivotal player, meaning the player that puts you over the quota. Which player puts you over the quota? Well, it depends on what order you are voting in. In this particular problem, in this particular instance, if you're talking player 1, player 2, player 3, you simply just have to total up their votes until they meet the quota. 9 and 8 make 17. Player 2 is pivotal. Player 1 and player 3 are 9 and 7. That's 16. Player 3 is pivotal. 2 and then 1 is 8 and then 9, which makes 17. Player 1 is pivotal. 2 and 3, 2 and 3 only make 15. You have not met the quota if it's just players 2 and 3. Player 1 is then the pivotal player. Technically, player 1 has veto power in this instance, but that's neither here nor there. If you go player 3 and then player 1, that's 7 and 9 is 16. They meet the quota. And then player 3 and 2, they've only met 15 votes. They need player 1 to be that pivotal player. The pivotal player is not always going to be like the second voter. It's not always going to be the third voter. It depends on when they meet the quota. For Shapley-Shubik, you have to list out all of the sequential orders and then determine who was critical in that order. Player 1 was critical 4 out of 6 times, which is 66.7%. Player 2 was only critical 1 out of 6 times, which was 16.7%. And player 3 was only critical 1 out of 6 times, which was 16.7%. Now, here's what's going to happen. Obviously, I don't have enough time to go through the rest of it right now because class is ending in a few minutes, but I want to tell you this. I saw on the homework thing for discrete math, did have a couple people turn in that homework. I'm not going to do this often. I'm going to be very clear. I'm not going to do this often. For those of you that have had me before, you know that I don't do this that often at all. In fact, Nicole, you had me for Prob Stat, and obviously you've had me for 2 different classes before, for Math of Sports and AP Stat. When have I ever extended a deadline? What one thing the other day? Yes, I took points off though. That was a direct consequence though. Here's the thing. I am going to extend this particular homework without penalty. I am going to extend this particular homework without penalty. The homework that was entitled weighted voting homework. I am going to extend that because I want people. Now, I know a couple of you have already turned it in. That's fantastic, but if you want to go back over it again, just to double check, just to make sure, I am going to extend that a little bit and have that due before class on Thursday. So I'm going to go into it right now as I am speaking to you. Edit. And I'm going to change the due date to Thursday at 7:20. Thursday. Because I want people to get that done. We will have an assessment on this soon. I will tell you when that will happen on Thursday. But we will have an assessment on this weighted voting system, Banzhaf, Power Index, Shapley-Shubik, things of that nature. We're going to have an assessment on that soon. And I want you guys to have the practice with that. So you're going to have that practice with that homework. We're going to wrap up whatever we need to do on Thursday. And then I'm going to let you know about the assessment, the major assessment that we're going to knock out on this particular chapter. So, bell's going to ring in about 10 seconds. If you haven't left a comment in the chat, please make sure that you do so. That would be fantastic. Yeah. And I guess we will see you next time. Ha-ha! Nailed it. That was pretty good. Come on, that was pretty good. Nothing? All right, whatever. I was actually really proud of myself. And the stream. Thank you, too. See ya.